When you're drinking a frozen beverage from McDonald's, your brain may not like how refreshingly cold it is. But the rest of your body? Oh, yes. It's gonna relish every moment of it. Because there are drinks. Then there are drinks from McDonald's.
Get all the chill you need for just $1.69. From any size frozen drink, like a frozen Fanta Blue Raspberry, to a new ice-cold lemonade. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oaten, and for almost a decade, I have been a transformation coach and therapist. This podcast is all about lifting the veil of consciousness and awakening to the truth. It is also about helping you to raise the bar in all areas of your life and relationships by starting with you. If you're ready to take back your personal power and reclaim your life, you have come to the right place. I'm so glad that you're here, so let's get started with today's episode. This is an encore episode of one of my most listened to podcast episodes called The Top 10 Definitive List That You Are Experiencing Narcissistic Abuse. One of the biggest questions that I get and the biggest themes that I see with women who are in these relationships is the depth of confusion and uncertainty and questioning if this is what they're experiencing. They get stuck in trying to label it and put it in a box and have this definitive knowing that yes, this is what it is. Because if they have any doubt in there, then it's easy to go, oh, well, maybe it's fixable because maybe this isn't actually what it is. And you read everywhere and see everywhere that those who have high narcissistic traits or an actual personality disorder are not going to change. And that is true. Unless they have a moment of radical awakening that they are the problem and they need to figure themselves out, nothing is going to change. That is the pervasive theme in these relationships, is women waste literally decades of their good portions of their lives waiting around for their partner to change. So I created this episode a while back, and I just wanted to publish it again to put it further up the list so that you can listen to it if you have not heard it before. But many women have listened to it and had a radical awakening that this is what they're experiencing. Because the first step in change is having that awareness and getting that clarity and conviction that this is a problem and it's not something I can fix, and it's likely something that is not going to change. So if that's the case, what am I going to do with that? And to get out of that self-sabotage of questioning and wondering, is this really what it is? So rather than trying to label and diagnose somebody's personality or their psychology, what I've done with this episode is it is signs of narcissistic abuse, not signs of he's a narcissist, because I find that just is not helpful and it's ridiculous. And some of the behaviors are things that you can sometimes see in like normal, regular people. So I find some of it kind of silly and redundant. I like to look at the patterns. And so what I've done with this episode is I've taken the patterns that I've seen be the most pervasive in women who come into my program, women I've worked with intensively in the trenches while they are in these relationships trying to get out. And I put them in this episode so that you can identify the patterns, because that's all you need to know is what are the patterns within you. You can look at someone or see that maybe they talk a lot about themselves, or they can tend to be a little self-centered or self-focused, but it's not making you question your sanity or feel like you're being belittled or feel like you don't have a voice, where when you're with a true narcissistic individual and they are not listening to you and they're not paying attention to your needs, then it's the feeling that it leaves you with that matters. All right. And it's the absolute chaos, crazy making confusion that they create. They create a lot of upset. They create a lot of blow ups within you because of the way that they treat you. So it's not just minor annoyances or tendencies towards selfish behavior or inconsiderate or, making the odd joke that doesn't land right. Like those are all things that are part of what you will see as abusive. But what I want you to do is to separate problematic behavior with how it is landing and making you feel. How is it impacting you? Without going further, I'm going to play that episode that is the top 10 definitive list that you are experiencing narcissistic abuse, whether we want to label the other person or not. This is how you know that this is what you're experiencing. And if you can identify with a few of these or all of these, get yourself on the wait list for the next cohort of my program, End the Cycle. This is a 6-month coaching and support class that helps you get the clarity you need and do the growth work that you need to do to get to clarity and know your exact next steps if this is what is going on for you. A lot of times women get stuck in this feeling of being trapped, like there is no way out. They've convinced themselves that there's no way out. But as you go through my signature process, I've led countless women through over the past 6 years, your clarity will come and your next steps will come, and you will start to see things more clearly and know exactly what to do from here. Whether you know what to do or not. That's the whole point and the intention of the program. So head to the link in the show notes now, pause this now, go do it before you forget or after you're done listening, and get yourself on that wait list. You'll be the first to know when we have a new intake happening. All right, so let's play that episode. All right, if you can identify with most of what we're going to be talking about here in this episode, you can stop doubting if you're with a narcissistic partner. That is my intention with this episode, to shake you awake and to dispel any more doubt that you have in your mind that, is he a narcissist? Is he not? Is it just me? Am I the one that's going crazy? Am I the problem? Maybe you don't identify that you experience a lot of what is traditionally said to be NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, because maybe he doesn't match all of those particular traits and his show up in a different way. So we're going to talk about what is NPD as a personality disorder in the DSM, what is narcissism, what are narcissistic traits, and what are 10 red flag, no more self-doubt tactics and traits and patterns that you are experiencing if you're with someone who has high narcissism as a personality disorder, or as high narcissism as in traits that maybe he has not been diagnosed or wouldn't diagnose as NPD, but there's still high levels of narcissism that turn out to be very problematic, very traumatic, and very debilitating within the relationship. So after you've listened to this episode, there will be no more doubt in your mind if you're experiencing narcissistic abuse. That's my intention for you in this episode. Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oaten, and for almost a decade, I have been a transformation coach and therapist. This podcast is all about lifting the veil of consciousness and awakening to the truth. It is also about helping you to raise the bar in all areas of your life and relationships by starting with you. If you're ready to take back your personal power and reclaim your life, you have come to the right place. I'm so glad that you're here, so let's get started with today's episode. All right, so let's dive in. This is going to be a bit longer of an episode, likely. I usually try to keep them around 10, 15, 20 minutes tops. This might go over because I have a lot to cover. I wanted to kick off the new year with a fresh slate here of this is how you can know if you're experiencing narcissistic abuse, because women who are in this, they do nothing but doubt themselves. They've experienced so much gaslighting, manipulation, and mindfuckery that they don't know what end is up. So they doubt themselves. And so as you're listening to this, if you can check off even 5 of these 10, you are experiencing narcissistic abuse without a shadow of a doubt. If I was working with you as your therapist or coach, and we did an assessment about your relationship, and you ticked off 5 or 6 of these 10, even maybe 3 or 4 of them as a pattern, I would tell you that you are experiencing very likely narcissistic abuse. If you're experiencing more than a couple, you definitely are. I mean, these are narcissistic traits and patterns, right? Someone doesn't have to be diagnosed with NPD or fit the criteria in a DSM to have high narcissism that is wreaking havoc in your life and causing you so much stress, anxiety, trauma, chaos, unease, just illness, fatigue, health issues. All of those things are the side effect of living with someone who's a crazy maker, a gaslighter, a manipulator, someone who is controlling your emotions. And, I'm here to talk about how you can get empowered. So this is for educational purposes, not to be taken as therapeutic advice or as the advice that you need to, diagnose somebody or diagnose your partner. Not at all. This is about arming yourself with what to look for so you can make more empowered choices moving forward. This isn't about to sit in it and say, poor me, I'm screwed, I'm stuck, there's no way out, I have no way, he's an asshole, he's this, he's that. It's about arming yourself with the facts so that you can start making healthier decisions about what you're going to do moving forward. That's my intention with this. It's not to demonize these personalities, even though, especially if you're in an intimate relationship with one, you can start to wonder if they really are just the devil spawn, that there's no feeling, there's nothing there, that they have an evil streak. And it can come across like that, especially if they have some of those psychopathic, sociopathic traits. They may have some of those mixed in with the inability to feel emotion, inability to have empathy, that cold, calculated, cool, aloof demeanor while they're abusing you and you're triggered as fuck and they're standing there looking at you like you're crazy and I'm so calm. I've been nothing but calm and just totally fine this whole time kind of thing. I'm doing great. It's you. Those are some of those psychopathic traits of like, I'm not the problem, you are. Look at me, I'm calm. They can abuse you and totally screw with your head while looking calm. That's what fucks with your head. All right, so we're going to talk about 10 narcissistic traits and tactics that will definitely clarify for you if you're experiencing narcissistic abuse. Even if online you've seen conflicting stuff and things that don't fit, this is the definitive list. If you're experiencing most of these things on a pattern, cyclic, repetitive basis over time, you're dealing with someone who's either a full NPD or someone with high narcissistic traits. Not here to diagnose anybody, but narcissistic abuse is its own thing. There is nothing else like it. There's very little success rate, if any, in someone with these traits actually changing. It's next to impossible for them to change these because they're so deeply ingrained. Other personality disorders such as borderline personality or someone who has traits of borderline, that is treatable, and actually borderline traits can mimic and kind of overlap with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you're someone who has had a lot of abuse in your history, childhood abuse, you might actually present as someone who has some BPD or some traits, but actually it's just trauma. So this is really important, and that is treatable. Trauma is treatable. BPD traits are treatable. It's not uncommon for someone with a narcissistic person to have BPD traits. So I don't want to minimize that. It is very serious. It can be serious, but BPD is actually treatable, whereas the consensus is across the board pretty much that someone with high narcissism or NPD is very likely not going to change. They're not treatable because they first have to realize they have a problem. And most don't ever get to that place of realizing they're the problem, because guess who the problem is? You and everyone else. It's not them. They don't have any issues, right? So that's really what I want to throw out there at the start here. While in my program, I do help women come to the realization if their partner is actually going to do the work and change or not, because you have to come to that realization on your own through your own work, right? To realize this is not changing, and you need to discover that on your own. But it's really about you becoming someone different so that you're no longer aligned with that anymore. You grow to this place where you no longer can even fathom or stand what you're seeing. It just becomes so intolerable and so obvious, right? But you have to get there on your own, and that can take years sometimes, from the point of awakening that you're experiencing narcissistic abuse to actually getting out of the situation. That can take years. It could take weeks or months. I've seen it all with women I've worked with, is They beat themselves up because even though they know what they know cognitively, it's still, they haven't had that shift yet. You can see it all, but you still haven't had that internal shift where I see it all and I'm not going back. There's no going back from this. And you start making steps toward what you're going to do next. And some women that come into ETCE, my program, they come in and they are out within the duration of the program, sometimes within the first month. Others are still trying to figure it all out. They've got kids, they've got entanglements, they've got things they need to sort out. So this isn't about if you can check these all off, he's not going to change, get out. This is if you have these present over a pattern of time, they're repeated, they're predictable, and you know that this is what you're dealing with, because after you listen to all this, you're going to know. Now it's, what are my next steps? What do I need to do? So the first thing that I have you do if you come into my program is bringing the focus to self. What's your part in this? What part do you play in this? What made you a match unconsciously for this type of person? Where you stayed past the first 1, 2, 3, or 4 red flags, you continued to stay. Why? We need to look at what's going on with you, because if you do not do that work, you can leave this person next month and end up with another narcissistic individual. It's almost 100% certain, if you don't do your own work, that you will end up with someone else that maybe looks different in the beginning, but turns out to be the same old shit, just a different person. So I also want to say, while narcissist is thrown around all over the place, this is about a pattern of behavior, right? Because we all have narcissism. We all need to have some narcissism on some level. For more on this, the best book I can really recommend on this is Rethinking Narcissism by Dr. Craig Malkin. He talks about the spectrum and how we need some, and how most of us in a relationship like this, we have too little. And he calls it echoism, where we just echo the narcissistic person because we don't have a healthy sense of self. So if you want to learn more about that, if you want to geek out on that, that would be where I would recommend that you go, because you really need to have some understanding, because you might be like, well, sometimes I act like that, right? We can all have narcissistic moments. We can all have those moments where we're like, oh, wow, that was really narcissistic of me, right? You have the awareness of it, though. That's the difference. Because you're going, oh, I don't want to be like that. My goodness, I don't want to be like anything like that. And so when we go through these things coming up here, as we're about to, you might go, oh, I've been like that before, or I've felt like that before, or I've done that before. But this is about moments, not patterns of behavior that occur in a cycle, right? There's a big difference. Sure, you could say something critical. You could say something nasty and mean and cutting. You can be passive aggressive at times, right? You might shut down and not give a shit how your partner feels because you've just had enough. You might have those times. But I'm talking about, in this type of relationship, there is one primary instigator, right? It's not it takes two to tango. It takes 50-50, it takes both people to make the problems. It goes both ways. No, not in this type of scenario. It does not go both ways. There's an instigator, and then there is the reactor, the one who's being traumatized, the one who is being gaslit. You're going to react, and there's going to be times when you're not going to act in ways that you know aren't right, but you'll be aware of it, right? You'll understand, that probably wasn't right. So, and you also might notice, as I've talked about here on the podcast, empath burnout, is there's times maybe when you don't have empathy. You're like, I don't give a shit how you feel. So then you're like, well, I must be the narcissist. So I want you to really take this as I go through these, as they're just markers for you to see the whole picture of what you're experiencing. And if you're questioning if you are the narcissistic one, you're not, simply because narcissists don't question if they're narcissists. Narcissists don't listen to podcasts about narcissism. They don't care. Narcissists don't listen to podcasts about anything to do with personal growth. They don't ask themselves, is it me? Am I the problem? Oh my gosh, maybe it's me. So if you're asking those things, you are already 10 steps above or more above the narcissistic partner, because you're asking yourself, oh shoot, is it me? Am I messed up? I need to work on that. I need to work on this. I need to stop doing that. You're constantly worrying about everybody else, not yourself. Whereas the narcissist is worrying about himself, not thinking about anyone else, right? There's a big difference in that. While you can behave in narcissistic ways and have those narcissistic moments, that does not mean that you are a disordered individual that has narcissistic personality. So I just really want to clarify that, because this gets really muddled. When you see a cyclic and predictable pattern of these traits that we're about to dive into, and you know that you're experiencing these behaviors, you can stop wondering if you are with a narcissist. You can stop today. I just want to provide one episode that I can send women who message me, I think it might be me. I think I might be the narcissist. I think I'm the problem. So you can see clearly what the main dominating issue is. So you can stop doubting if you're just crazy. You might feel like you are, because this can drive you to feel that way. But to stop doubting if it's you, or if, you're just really in a fog of being able to see how much abuse you're actually experiencing every day, day in, day out. And we're going to dive into that. So let's get to it. Okay, so as promised, this episode is going to be where you actually put aside all doubts that what you're experiencing is narcissistic abuse. You're going to put aside wondering if your partner is a quote-unquote narcissist. We're going to talk about behaviors and patterns, because that's what you want to be looking for to know if someone is exhibiting high levels of narcissism. It is said by psychologists that changing narcissistic personality or the disordered cluster of behaviors that we're going to talk about here is impossible. Like, that's what a lot of psychologists will say. Like, just run, get away, it's not going to change. And I really believe that every woman has to get to that place on their own, through their own awakening, personal growth, boundaries, really starting to come back to themselves, starting to work on changing their own perceptions, beliefs, thoughts, all of it. And that's what I help women do in my program. I don't help you stay in a toxic situation, and I also don't tell you what to do. Aside from physical abuse, I want to provide you with the tools, coaching, support, strategy, so that you can get there on your own time. Because only you will know when that time is right. There is no rushing that shift of you just know, and there is no going back. You can't force it. It's not something you can just say, I need to feel this way, I need to be clear, I need to know, I need to get out. You will only know when you've gotten the growth and the evolution to be able to see your situation differently. So we're going to talk about the 10 tactics here. Okay, so the number one, this is like pretty much anyone who uses gaslighting as a way of being in the world is a narcissist. It's their number one tool, their favorite tool. It's something that you will see across the board that normal people don't do. Right? It's not something that is part of your personality. One of my really dear friends and I talk about this a lot, because we've both experienced gaslighting and narcissistic abuse. And we've joked about, like, how would I gaslight? Like, how could we even gaslight one another? Like, it's so bizarre, because you'd have to actually do something nasty or negative first, have someone question you, and then gaslight the fuck out of them so they don't question you anymore. They start questioning themselves. That's the tactic, right? So not only do you have to have that ability to know how to do that to somebody, you also have to be doing things before that even happens that are fucked up. So the whole thing is messed up. So they'll abuse you, and then they'll gaslight the fuck out of you to try and make you doubt yourself, so you'll stop questioning their behavior, right? And it works until it doesn't, until you wake up, until you see things, and you start responding differently. So the gaslighting is anything that they say or do that makes you question your reality. These are things like, you took it wrong. You always just want to see the negative in me. You are always looking for the negative. You know, nothing's ever good enough for you. You always have a problem. You're never happy. They say all of whatever they need to say to make you think that you're the problem. You're not seeing it right. You didn't hear it right. You're not feeling it right. You're wrong. And then you start questioning yourself, your reality. And I have other episodes on gaslighting, so I will reference the episodes on gaslighting. And any of these other ones we're going to go through, what I'll do is I'll reference them in the show notes so you can go right to those numbers, because I'm not going to go into this here. I just want to give a framework so you have it all in one place to be able to say, yes, this is what I'm dealing with. I need to stop doubting it. You need to stop doubting, because when you go into self-doubt, you go into self-deception, and then you go into self-sabotage and start minimizing and, self-doubting what is going on. And we need to snap out of that. So the number one tool of a narcissistic personality is gaslighting. That is pervasive. You will see that across all different types of narcissists, because there are many types. There's the covert, overt, communal, there's malignant, there's so many different types. There's some with psychopathic traits. So we're not going to get into that here. That's something for you to look into if you're needing more. But just know that the gaslighting, making you doubt your reality, is pervasive. It is something that is for sure. I don't know of any other disorders that would cause somebody to use gaslighting. It's for some reason. I don't know the psychology behind it. I'm not a psychologist. I have a counseling background. And the interesting thing is, in the schooling I did for counseling, while it was a really awesome training program to learn the art and the ethics and the processes of counseling, narcissism was barely touched on. So when you're going to see a therapist for help, it's not really their fault that they don't catch this stuff, because it isn't something that's taught. Even in, if someone goes to like a psychologist even, or a social worker, or anyone, right? Unless you have experienced it, it's pretty hard to see it, right? To see the covert stuff. So number one is gaslighting. Number two, projecting. This is where they are basically telling you everything that they're saying you are. This is where you start to really shake your head and you're like, whoa, they'll tell you that you are confusing them. They'll tell you that you're manipulative, that you're vindictive, that you're selfish. They will project their qualities onto you. They'll tell you you don't have any empathy, or that you're not trying, or that, there's no getting through to you. So any of the qualities that they have, they will start telling you that you have them. And that's where you're like, it really does make your head spin, because you're like, whoa. And after a while, you start believing it, because it's done in such a way that you do start to wonder, maybe I am selfish. Maybe I am all these things due to the gaslighting, right? You don't know yourself, which is problem number one. You need to know yourself so that you are not susceptible to this type of mental twisting and brainwashing, right? So someone projecting their traits onto you that aren't really you, but you can start to believe them. So if you notice your partner he's saying things to you that you're like, what? That's you. You're doing that. Or they will accuse you of doing things that they themselves are doing or have done. So that's number two, is projecting their traits and behaviors and feelings onto you. Number three is blame. They're masters of shifting blame. This is where you will sit down and say, listen, you did this and you said that. And they'll say, well, you did it too. So for an example, you said something to them about their behavior that was questionable. And instead of apologizing or owning up to it, they go into a rage and start yelling at you and freaking out at you that all you do is see the worst in them and you're a horrible person because you never want to look at the positive and blah, blah, blah. And they just go off on you and freak out. You may have yelled back in that interaction. You might have raised your voice. You may have said some things due to your stress hormones going through the roof and being triggered. Maybe you're in a vehicle, right? They're really good at pinning you in a vehicle when no one else is around, driving down the road while they're, you can't get away, right? So maybe you react. Maybe you yell back. And you get home or the next day and you say, that really was upsetting. I didn't like that experience. I don't want to be yelled at. I'm hurt, whatever it might be. And they'll say, well, I haven't done that for a while, something like that, or I hardly ever do that. And you yelled too. So they're never taking full accountability, and it fucks with your head because you're like, well, he's kind of right. I did yell back and I did say some nasty things back. But in all of these altercations, and this is true with anything, there's always going to be that instigator. So yes, sure, it takes two. So you could have, in an instance like that, sat there quietly breathing, letting them have their yelling experience or whatever, and sat there quietly and not reacted, sure. But that's pretty difficult to do in the moment when someone is in a vehicle, and this happened to me, so that's why it came to my experience, trapped in a vehicle, flying down the highway while you're being yelled at. That's pretty hard to sit there and deep breathe and go into a Zen state. It's going to be flooding you with stress hormones and anxiety and trauma, right? And so to not react would be pretty impossible, I think. I don't know. So you yell back and you start saying things back. And you're told you yelled too. So you start questioning yourself, and this is how they equalize. They try to put you on the same level. This is a we problem. Takes two to tango. It's 50-50. You have issues too. You did this too. What about what you did 10 years ago? What about you saying this thing to me? And so those things where you're kind of like, yeah, well, I did do those things and I have said those things. So you question yourself. So they're constantly minimizing what they do and inflating the things that you've done. And your transgressions or mistakes or reactions are blown out of proportion and used against you, while theirs is minimized and they are basically saying you're the problem. I acted this way because you just can't see the good in me and I lost it, right? So there's always that thread of blame, so you never feel like they're owning anything. It's always your fault. And all the women I've ever worked with that I've coached, they all feel at fault. They feel like the problems are because of them. This is one of the hugest themes that I see with women. And this is, you'll hear other people online or other podcasts or experts talking about this. I'm speaking more from my own personal experience and from being in the mud, basically, in the trenches with these women, helping them to see, right? Helping them to get clarity. They all feel like it's their fault. The weight is on them. How does that happen? When they're the ones, all they want is the relationship to work. They want love, they want respect, they want normal, they want to have conversation, they want a partner that apologizes, that treats them well. Just basic shit. So how is it that all of the conflict and problems and ongoing chaos is made to feel like it's their fault? And you may be able to identify with this. This is part of the abuse, right? So recognizing that the blame is being put on you so they don't have to take any of it, right? They'll blame you for everything and take none. Or maybe they'll throw you a crumb. Yeah, I yelled, but you yelled too, kind of thing, right? So that's the third one, is blame shifting. Gaslighting, projecting, blame shifting. Those are the top three. Then we go into number 4, which is minimizing. So again, minimizing in this scenario, being told, well, I don't remember the last time I yelled at you like that. That's not normally what I do. I just had a moment and I lost it. Sure, okay, maybe in a normal relationship, okay, there could be that time where things get heated, voices are raised, something happens. But when we're talking about this in the realm of all this other shit that's going on, the gaslighting and all this. And they're trying to minimize that I just yelled at you and it's just this one time. Oh, I just gaslit you, but you're making a big deal out of it, right? Or you're this or you're that. It's just so much of this, right? So they're minimizing what they're doing, and you start to minimize it as well. Or yeah, I did that, but you did that 10 years. So yeah, I was emailing such and such woman, but what about 10 years ago when you were having an emotional relationship or emotional affair? Or you're calling out their drinking, and they say, well, I remember when you were like drinking wine every night, right? Things like that. Or you drink wine every night. So there will just be this air of constantly minimizing, that it's like, I was just reacting. I've had a moment. Let's move on, right? It always feels like what actually happened, they're just trying to like dampen it down to like, it was really not as big of a deal as you're making it. And they will say things like that. It's not that big of a deal, or they'll say things like, when everything is going well, it seems like you always want to do something to ruin it or cause problems or cause a fight. So instead of you getting the matter addressed that you brought up, they will minimize their actions and make it about you. So it's very subtle. If you don't understand this and see it as a whole picture, you can easily miss all of these things on their own if they're just one thing happening every now and then. But it's looking at the whole picture. And that's where the lights start to come on, the light bulb moments. So number 4 is they are constantly, chronically minimizing their behavior and their abuse and their words and their actions. Number 5, there is an emotional emptiness. There's no depth. You could sit there and pour your heart out, and they will gaslight the fuck out of you in that. They'll minimize it. They'll blame. They'll project. They'll do all of those things. There's no depth. So you could be, for an example, looking up at the gorgeous night sky. The stars are out. You're out for a hike. It's dark sky, clear skies, beautiful full moon, and you're just in awe. And just it's beautiful to you, and you're saying, hey, look how beautiful this is, and they're like, you remind me of a toddler. Or just minimizing your emotional experience, and you could be sharing something that really hurt you, and it's like there's no one home. You could be talking about anything that hurt you, and there's just no emotional alignment there at all. So it feels like you're literally talking to a brick wall. I remember a time sharing with someone that, some ways that I was feeling hurt, and being told, well, I can't make you feel anything, right? And that's a very popular self-help meme. Nobody can make you feel anything without your consent and all of this. Well, I don't think that applies to abuse when you're being verbally and emotionally manipulated and treated poorly. It's supposed to feel like shit because it's abuse, right? So there's a grain of, take that with a grain of salt, that no one can make you feel anything. So if you are with someone who's abusing you and using that line, that is more abuse. No one can make you feel anything. So I hurt you. I treated you with disrespect. I said awful things to you, but I don't take ownership for that because you're responsible for how you feel. There's no way to have an emotional connection. So you will feel like when you're trying to have that with this person, not there. It's like a blank stone wall. No facial expressions in being able to attune to you. They can shut it down. They'll also change the subject. So you could be sharing something really vulnerable with them and want support, and they'll just change the subject into something totally random, and you're like, what the fuck, dude? What? Right? That is mental abuse for somebody to do that. And it's a pattern. Again, someone could get distracted, but this is a pattern. So look at how many times have you tried to go to your partner for emotional connection and understanding, to attune and align with your partner on an emotional level, and bam, something happens that you just like, well, that was a mistake, right? Because there's no way to get there. And they will use your lingo to make it sound like they are emotionally literate, because they'll use your words, but they don't have that to access within themselves because they don't even know how to feel. They're not in touch with their feelings, right? And you may not be as well, right? That doesn't mean that you don't have your own work to get in touch with your feelings. You do. But all women I work with are deep feelers, and they are feeling, but they're also pushing a lot down and just trying to get by and trying to forge forward. And that they are actually emotionally deep feelers, like just feel so deeply. It takes a lot for one of us feelers to get to a place where we're emotionally cut off from somebody, where we have to eventually get to a place of emotional coldness. It's the only way to actually get ourselves out of a situation like this, is to develop, and I've talked about this in a previous episode, balancing your empathy with your logic. If we are too much driven by our empathy, we're going to be in the ditch. We're going to stay in situations that are toxic for us because we are relying too much on our, I feel so bad. Like the slightest thing you might do that's vindictive, or maybe just a little bit nasty, or a boundary that you kind of feel bad about, right? You feel so bad about it, but they're not feeling bad. They've treated you like dirt and they don't feel bad. So we know that you have that ability and that is who you are, but it can get dampened down through long-term abuse. So just a side note. The sixth is they don't feel remorse or guilt or empathy. You can tell. They might say some slick words or give you some kind of half-assed apology, but it doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel like it's genuine because they don't have that remorse, right? When you hurt somebody and someone tells you that you hurt them, you feel bad. Like you feel actually like over the top guilt. You feel so much empathy for people, and it's not fake. It's literally like you feel it. You feel bad being even slightly nasty or vindictive to someone. Like it doesn't feel right. It's not who you are. And so setting those boundaries and putting those in place with someone like this, you're going to feel that guilt, right? That's every woman pretty much feels that unhealthy, toxic guilt. And again, it's because you've been programmed to feel that way, when actually it's their guilt that they need to feel, but they don't. They will never. So that's number 6, doesn't feel remorse or guilt or empathy. Number 7 is they engage in crazy making. This is when you're in a conversation, you're trying to raise a grievance. Hey, I've got this issue. Here's what you did. I don't like this. I've told you that I don't like this. And it starts going off the rails. You start getting confused, like your head is spinning, and you're suddenly defending yourself. You're suddenly talking about something you did 5 months ago, 5 years ago. You're explaining yourself, and you're trying to stand up for yourself. You're saying, hey, no, that's not true. I didn't do that. Remember, this is what happened, and this is why it happened, and that's not who I am, and that's not true. And you're defending yourself because they've gone in and used all these tactics to make you like spin on your head. Like you literally start to feel like everything is spinning, and you've lost sight of the original topic. You're like, what were we talking about? Because isn't that interesting how what I brought up is no longer on the table. Now we're talking about me and what I've done wrong. That is what they do. And crazy making is, the way I describe it, is it's a mix of all of these behaviors we're talking about being used, like kind of like a mix, right? It's like they're all jumbled up. And they're like, I'm going to throw the blame, then I'm going to project, and then I'm going to minimize, then I'm going to gaslight, and then I'm going to, and it's just all of that in one. That's how I see crazy making communication. But, it is what it is. It's crazy making. It makes you feel like you're losing your blip in mind. And they all engage in this. All narcissistic people engage in this, narcissistic partners. And it will leave you feeling, every interaction, you'll walk away feeling drained. You might be full of anxiety. You might feel traumatized in your body where you've got that inner shaking, inner trembling. Your heart might be racing. You might feel pressure. You might feel tension. Just pay attention, because you'll start to know when it's happening when you're in your body, right? And then from there, that's where you need to learn the boundaries and how to protect yourself in those situations. Number 8 is hoovering. They all do this. So I wish there was another word for this, because I don't really love all the lingo and the popular terms that are used. I always like to make up my own meanings, but this is going to help you because you can look up more information on this. But it is basically, if you can imagine hoovering as a vacuum, and they are behaving in ways to suck you back into the cycle. If you see it from that way, then you will be very clear that that's what's happening. So hoovering can be a negative or a positive event. Oh, you might have separated, for instance, and all of a sudden, something's happening in my life. I'm not doing so well, and I miss you, and I'm really struggling here. I feel like I might kill myself. I've had that shared with me, threatening those kinds of things. That might be a hoover. Or a hoover might be, I miss you. It might be flowers. It might be gifts. It might be, let's go on a vacation. Let's go buy a house. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's go to counseling. Blah, 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 blah. On and on. So it's any tactic, or like a sudden, like, I'm going to just be my best self and make her think I've changed, to hoover her back in for another round. So that's what hoovering is. So if you can imagine and look at what behaviors your partner does that suck you back in to the cycle, and looking at those. So I always say too that love bombing is said to be only happening in the very beginning of a relationship, with the intense, overwhelming just gestures and gifts and presents and attention, like it's over the top. They start to re-engage in some of that as a hoover maneuver. The attention and the too much attention and the too attentive, and it feels like a boundary violation. Expensive gifts or flowers or things like that. So just being aware that hoovering is a manipulation tactic. It is not actual change. We have to know the difference. Number 9 is they have a predictable, nice, mean cycle. It's a pattern. They have a nice side. They can be wonderful. They can make you feel amazing, like a high, when they're giving you attention and they're giving you love and they're adoring you and, doing all the nice things. They make you feel really special and important. And then the drop of a hat, they can make you feel like you mean nothing to them and you're disposable and that you're replaceable, that your relationship doesn't really matter. What you want and think doesn't matter. And then they're right back into the tactics again that we're talking about here. So you're going to see those two sides. And the nice side is what keeps you hooked. You're waiting for that return to what you experienced originally in the relationship when you first met. When you look back, 9 times out of 10, a relationship with a narcissist begins with intense love bombing, which is over the top. It will feel, if you think back, it's overwhelming. It made you feel uncomfortable, but yet you're like, it feels so good at the same time. And he's just trying to be nice. And I feel so special. And I feel so loved. Like I've never experienced this before. It's a high. It just feels like you're on top of the world. And so at some point that switches. And for the rest of the relationship, you're trying to get back that person that you think you've done something to make that go away. So you're always trying to get back to that, thinking that's the baseline. But that was the manipulation. That was the hoovering you into the relationship, sucking you in with all these empty promises and attention and gifts and money and whatever it might be. So understanding that the nice, and I know we want to believe that maybe they do have a nice side, that there is some good in them. I just don't know, because I just really feel that any good that you see in them is often an act. It's done to look good. It's done to get what they want in the end. It's done for everybody else to go, oh, he's such a good guy, he's such a good dad, such a good husband, such a good community man. Like, look at him being so altruistic and volunteering and doing all these things and helping out anyone at the drop of a hat. It's so that he can carry on that good guy persona, right? Are people all bad? No, I think anybody can do nice things, but we have to look at a pattern of behavior. That is the person's character. The pattern, what you see mostly, is who they are. So if someone is nice to you once in a while, but 99% of the other time or 95% of the other time, they're an asshole and they're abusive and they're making you feel crazy and they're making you feel anxious. You're walking on eggshells. You feel tense and just uptight and unsafe, clenched around them. That's what you feel most of the time, right? That's who you're dealing with. That's who it is. So you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, well, but what about the nice things? What about those warm moments that I look back on that I thought were real? But if you look back on moments you thought were real, there was still something not quite right. And that is just devastating when you look back on what you thought was real and you're looking at it from a different lens. That is like, yeah, even those amazing events, weddings, having kids, other things, there was still an emptiness there. And even those things were tainted with abuse and, disrespect and jabs and mindfuckery and all of that, right? So everything is tainted with their personality traits, everything. I had this one time where I was pregnant and the father of the baby was away a lot. And when he came home from just like a break in what he was doing, I wanted to set up the tripod and take pregnancy photos. This is one of those memories where it's like, it was just so horribly painful, but I wanted to take pregnancy photos because I was going to have the baby soon and we hadn't had any. And so I wanted to set up the tripod, and he acted so annoyed and so irritated and so put off, like just resisted it, was just being an absolute shit about it. Like, I still remember it to this day. And those are the kinds of moments that, could be made beautiful or, could be positive moments that are tainted because of how they behave, right? So you have to look at everything overall and ask yourself, was the nice stuff I saw real? Was it an act? Likely. Was it a way to hoover you back into another cycle? Likely. Was it to try and make up for the abuse so you'll forget about it and carry on and then they can be absolved of it? Yes. When they do things that look altruistic and so wonderful, it is so they can look good. They look good when they're volunteering and showing up for people at the drop of a hat, dropping everything at 10:30 at night and helping someone. That makes them look good. It makes them, feed into that good guy persona that they are attached to. They think they're good people. But good people don't treat those they love in the ways that you are being treated. So that's all I'll say on that one. So number 9 is all narcissistic individuals have these two sides. The nice guy, the charming guy, the slick guy, the one that can make you feel amazing, and then the one that can knock you down at your knees and make you just hit your rock bottom. So you're going to have both of those. That is not normal. That's not healthy love at all, of course. And the 10th one is stonewalling. So this can show up in many ways. It shows up as the silent treatment. I've heard women share that their partner will go silent on them for like 2 weeks or more and not say a word to them in the house. Just completely ignore them, act like they don't exist. So that's one form of stonewalling, but there are others. There is not taking in your ideas, feelings, and desires as valid It's shutting them down. It's minimizing them. It's not even listening to your side of things. So if you're in a conversation and things are shut down constantly, your ideas are minimized and completely just like not important, that's stonewalling. Stonewalling is also, I'm not having this conversation anymore. You're trying to talk to them about and bring things to their attention. They don't want to listen to that anymore because it makes them feel like shit to think about their behavior. So they will, I'm not having this conversation anymore. Or I'll block you. Or this conversation is over. I'm done, right? When the thing hasn't been resolved. So that's another way. They will also fidget or scroll on their phone, look at their watch, eye roll, certain things that they will do to shut down the conversation or to make it very obvious that they got better things to do. Like, this is taking my time up. Can you hurry up and, say what you need to say? I got shit to do, right? So those are some other forms of stonewalling. Another way is when you're trying to have a conversation with them and they just sit there with that blank stare. They'll just sit there and stare, and there will be no response, where you're like, hey, I just freaking laid my heart out and my feelings here about what you've done and how upsetting it is. And they sit there with their arms crossed, even with just this blank, nobody's home stare. It is unnerving. It's creepy as fuck. And it makes you feel uncomfortable because you're like, what's happening here? Why are you staring at me like you don't understand a thing I just said? So there's different forms of stonewalling, but the idea is basically, shut up. I don't want to hear what you have to say. What you have to say is not important. It's not valid. I have better things to do. I'm too good to sit here and listen to this kind of thing. So those are 10 big traits. Now, this is not exhaustive. I mean, we could go on for 5 hours, and I go into this much deeper inside of my program and the cycle, because you really need to understand what you're dealing with and see it as a big picture with patterns. That's the biggest piece of it. All of these things, maybe if just one thing was happening on occasion, we would be like, oh yeah, maybe it's just a narcissistic trait or tendency they have, because we all have some, right? We all can go there. But the lack of ownership, the lack of introspection is what makes these people so dangerous, because they're not sitting back going, I wonder if I hurt her when I said that, or I probably should do that differently next time. That wasn't my best self, and I need to make sure I don't do that again, right? If you do something that hurts somebody, or you realize later, you're like, ooh, I didn't like that about myself, that I responded in that way. You have that ability to be introspective. They do not do that. So that's what's missing here, right? If you have someone that has problematic patterns or behaviors, on occasion, that's different than when you're dealing with this stuff on a daily basis. The gaslighting, projecting, blame shifting, minimizing, emotionally empty, no depth, no ability to connect. They don't feel remorse, guilt, or empathy. They do crazy making. They try to make you feel crazy. They do the hoovering to suck you back in for more. Then they go into the nice mean cycle. The mean is going to follow the nice every time. Could take 3 months, 4 months, even 6 months, and you're like, oh, there it is again. And the stonewalling. So those are the things you're going to see happening basically on a continual level. They're always going to be there on some level. They can happen in one interaction. They could all happen within 1 week, 1 day. And that is what makes this so toxic and unhealthy and damaging, is this whole combination of behaviors, and they're ongoing to wear you down. Because when you're confused and unsure of yourself and who you are, you're much easier to manipulate. When you are clear on what is happening, the light has come on, you get to this place where you see things very differently. While it's still upsetting and it's gross, you're going to see it and almost laugh, because it's so predictable. And you'll be like, oh, there he is doing that, and oh, there it's that, and there's that. You will be able to stand more in your power in that and make more empowered decisions. So I'm going to wrap that up here because this episode is going on for an hour, which I do not normally do. This is not normally what the length that I record, but I wanted to have this episode for you to help you to dispel any doubt and guilt that what you're experiencing is narcissistic abuse. It doesn't matter if he doesn't have a label. We don't need to know if he's NPD or just has traits or if he's whatever else it might be. If you're experiencing these behaviors on a pattern, this is literally like more days out of the week you are experiencing these things than not. Like pretty much every day you're experiencing some of this. It's ongoing. It's not single events or occasional breaches or mistakes. Then you can put away any doubt and know I am in an abusive relationship. My partner is highly narcissistic, if not NPD. You don't need a label. You just need to know this is what you're experiencing. And then you need to go, what am I going to do about it? So if you would like to work with me on all of this, getting clarity, knowing what your next steps are, the boundaries, how to reclaim self, to get out of the fog, I recommend my programs. I have one that is a 30-day intensive that we're doing in February. And I also always have my End the Cycle Evolve open for enrollment. You can head to the link in the show notes to get into one of those two options if you are wanting help. If you want something right now at this time, the End the Cycle Evolve is open for enrollment. You can hop in right now and dive in straight away. Get into our community, get into the modules, and start doing the work. So I hope this has been helpful and that you can feel a little bit of a sense of peace in knowing that it's not you. You've just been experiencing really slick, covert manipulation and abuse. And now it's time to do something about it. All right, I'll end there. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out with me for this episode. If you love this content and want more, make sure to follow Awakening Women Support on Instagram and Facebook for daily posts and inspiration. Also, make sure to join our brand new podcast discussion community on Telegram. Simply click the link in the show notes and it will take you right there. If you love the show, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review in the iTunes app. I so appreciate it, and I will chat with you again on the next episode. Take care.
Gold's Gym Germantown is now open on Middlebrook Road in Germantown Commons, presented by Celsius. Brand new equipment, functional turf area, group exercise, personal training, luxury locker rooms, and more. Get your first workout free. Visit goldsgymdcmetro.com to view special membership rates.